Welcome back to RSA Conference 2021, live from Virtual Broadcast Alley. I am your host again for this segment, Adrian Sanabria. Joining me today for this segment is Jess Byrne, a senior analyst at Forrester Research. Welcome to Security Weekly, Jess.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, we've had some great conversations with a lot of the great analysts over at Forrester. I was just telling Jess, I used to be an analyst, so it's a lot of fun for me. It's some definite nostalgia there. I can't wait till we get back to physical conferences, but for now we're all meeting each other over Skype and Zoom.
That's right.
So he almost changed the my script to welcome to a very special episode of As the Cybersecurity World Turns, the soap opera where we explore the process of security products emerging, growing, and consolidating. I love it. Personally, it sounds like we share this love of just watching these emerging categories, trying to figure out where they're going to go, what they're going to do, if they're going to fail, if they're going to, hit the right mark. It sounds like you have a great love of that, Jess, and you were doing that even before you joined Forrester.
Yes. Well, I spent some time with Forrester on our Security and Risk Council. So that's our group, our peer networking group of CISOs. And over those 8 years, I watched technology, wax and wane, and I watched new emerging technology come to the fore. And then I watched people reject it for various reasons or adopt it for other good reasons. And it's been great to now be an analyst to sort of document this. And one of the first things I did is, as an analyst starting in January, was our Tech Tide report, and that's on detection and response technologies. And that is one where you can see a lot of change. It's continuing to happen. In fact, things sort of evolved even after we had put the document to bed and before we published it. So, especially with things like XDR. So it's been a really interesting time. And, there are some of these technologies that we feel ended up in our Divest category for a reason, and we can definitely go into those reasons now.
Yeah, I'd love to. But first, that terminology, the Divest category, help me understand what that means and what that is.
So mainly it means don't continue to invest, right? If you're coming up toward the end of a contract life cycle for one of those technologies, it may be the time to consider alternatives, or it may be the time to look at what you already have that may have those capabilities in place already. It doesn't necessarily mean kill it or that it's dead. In some cases, maybe so in some of our other tech tides, but for some of the categories that ended up in that quadrant this time, it was really because there are other ways to get to those capabilities than buying a standalone solution.
Yeah, it's almost like you're, like a stock analyst, giving buy and sell recommendations.
Yeah, I don't want to take any full stock advice from me, but yeah, it certainly feels like that sometimes.
So yeah, I think especially with the use of buzzwords here, where a lot of companies will latch on to the new buzzword and apply it with seemingly no change to the product. Like yesterday was EDR, today it's XDR. What changed? It can
My
be difficult
colleague
to
Ali
figure
Mellon
out.
may beg to differ with what changed and the differences between those two. And I know she spoke with you guys earlier this week, but that's definitely an interesting market to watch. And I would encourage everybody to look at her report on Forrester called Adapt or Die about XDR.
Yeah, it came up again with Steve Turner made a comment, and I caught it and asked him about it, where he said actual XDR companies. Like he didn't do the air quotes like I just did, but he said actual XDR companies. I was like, so there are companies who are not actual XDR.
Well, there are definitely companies who are not zero trust either.
Sure.
And that's part of the buzzword bingo. In fact, Steve and myself and our colleague David Holmes are working on Forrester's definition of zero trust. There's a lot flying out there right now, and I think it's really important that Forrester put a stake in the ground. We've written great research on it. We've paved the way for this technology to expand in adoption, but I think we really need to put our mark out there in terms of an official definition from Forrester. So that's going to be coming soon. Stay tuned.
Excellent. And I think that's one of the things I loved about the analyst life was, we needed somebody we could look to help make some sense of all this mess. and help us understand, what these terms actually mean, what these companies are actually doing, as opposed to maybe what their marketing claims.
Absolutely. I think we're talking about divesting in standalone solutions for maybe larger platform solutions, but then there are also companies that are saying they have a platform and really it's just a portfolio. There's a lot of marketing hype to cut through in the security tech industry, and I think we are trying to do our best, as our other firms, to cut through that and offer our end users reality. I think one of the things that our end users and the CISOs that I worked with closely really appreciated in terms of zero trust was the practical guide to implementation, which I really laid out. If you're going to do this, here's where you start, and here's eventually where you get to as you rise in levels of maturity. So I want to make sure that we continue to put out more practical guides and give people those definitions to understand when it's time to invest in something and what it's going to take to implement it.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Your point about companies with portfolios rather than platforms, and I'm assuming the difference there is, somebody might do a bunch of acquisitions but not do a very good job of integrating them together, and sometimes it can be hard to tell if that integration has happened. Sometimes it seems like the product just disappears into the ether, and I guess we assume it became a feature in another product, but I think sometimes also, they decide maybe this wasn't a great acquisition and they put it out to pasture, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It all depends on the company. I've also seen people say that they have an integrated portfolio, but they're relying on other companies to actually do that integration of their own products, with APIs and other forms of software. So it's important for people to look at how much legwork is going to need to be done to see the value of a platform versus a portfolio. And we've been saying to folks in this time of tech consolidation that it's okay to fight for a best of breed or a standalone solution. The ones I highlighted in the Tech Tide and in my blog about the Tech Tide, to me, are not those standalone solutions that you need to be making a business case for and fighting for, but there are others. You need to decide based on, business risk, based on what the impact to your program's maturity will be if you get rid of one of your solutions for a good enough capability that's part of a larger platform. So that's company by company and CISO by CISO to understand and decide.
So what would you recommend here? Is it does seem like maybe a lot of the news, it's best to ignore a lot of the new stuff as it's coming out. Maybe wait till it gets to a certain point of maturity in the cycle. Wait until it gets consolidated and things like that. Like personally, I'm thinking of stuff like CASB. When I started working as an analyst, CASB was huge, burned very bright, raised a bunch of money. Almost all of them got acquired, and then it felt like we just never heard from them again. And all of a sudden, most of the CASB stuff seems like it's been relabeled as SASE. And it that was one of those. I'm sure there's categories where you look at the category and you're like, bless your hearts, that's not gonna stick. And CASB just felt like one of those for me. Like the use cases they had were amazing, but nobody had time to build them or implement them.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of that. I think there were some folks that had moved early on to cloud environments before the actual cloud platform providers had much, and CASBs were helpful, according to the folks that I used to work with. But I think there is some value in experimentation. So we do have an experiment category in the Tech Tide, and we've put in there cyber range services, deception tech, which is actually kind of stuck there in the experiment category, and EDR is actually there right now as well. And again, I would rely on Ali for the guru guidance for EDR and XDR and all things analytics. But for cyber ranges, for example, that we had thought might even end up in Invest, but the pandemic sort of paused that technology for a little while, in that in-person simulated experiences that some larger consulting firms and tech firms can do. Obviously, people couldn't do that last year, but there has been a rise in virtual breach simulations that are really well done. And I get a lot of phone calls, as to many of my colleagues, about how do we really get our executives to understand what it's going to feel like, because it's a matter of when that we're going to be in some sort of a situation where we need to make quick decisions. And so executive tabletop exercises and getting a third party to come in and help with those is really critical right now. So cyber range technology is really, really helpful for that really high stress environment. So I would say that's something to definitely experiment with, because you've got to do these exercises anyway. You've got to prepare not only technically, but your board and your senior suite for a pretty rough time if you're breached.
Yeah, 100%. That's, one of the things that I often preach when I advise organizations is to practice. It's almost like a sport. Like if you practice incident response once a year, you're gonna suck. You're not gonna be very good at it. I wouldn't expect to be very good at basketball if I practiced once a year. And it's, it's interesting. I was watching a keynote earlier today from Wade Baker and Wendy Nather, where they're going over these outcomes report, that I think Cisco and Scientia Labs put out. And super interesting, some of the results they got from that, because they were basically asking people, what security practices resulted in these outcomes that you're going after, and which didn't. And one of those is something that you touch on here. Well-integrated tech is number 2 on that list, on the most effective. And it was most effective in retaining security talent and creating security culture, which was, it's one of those things that was surprising to me. But, once you think about it, it's not that surprising, because if one person has to take care of 7 point products, they ain't going to be very happy versus, getting to work with one more mature, more integrated platform.
Absolutely. And I want to put in a plug for later today. I think you guys already interviewed her, but Janan Budge's keynote or session on security culture is coming up later today at the conference. So she's a favorite. This is a passion project for her, and I'm all on board. But yeah, I think retention is a huge issue right now, and anything you can do to get some of that sort of commodity work off the plate of your top talent is the right thing. So I'm not surprised to see that result in that report. And actually, one of the reasons why we put MSSPs on the divest list as well is because they never fully realized their potential of truly augmenting a SOC or becoming a company's SOC. So MDR, in our opinion, and definitely check in with my colleague Jeff Pollard on this, is really the next wave of this, and where managed security services is going. So you're augmenting the things that your team doesn't want to do anymore, that commodity work, and you're allowing them to get in there and upskill in areas where you need it most, and help them become, those hunters, or help them just become more sophisticated response folks on the SOC. So yeah, there's definite need to get rid of the busy work.
Yeah, that's actually very close to how I used to describe, or not used to, I still describe MSSPs like that somewhat. And there are some exceptions. There are some good ones out there, but generally I regarded them as, when I'm tired of doing a crappy job at something and I want someone else to instead do that crappy job for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and there's this, I think one of the things people often don't think enough about, I think, is what I call the customization tax. Anytime you hire somebody else to do something for you, or you bring in somebody else's product that they've created, they can only be so prepared for your environment, and your environment's going to be unique. Your processes are going to be unique and different from other people that buy the same product or get the same service. And there's going to be some work there to make it work for you, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And this comes back to that practice piece again when it comes to incident response, and that, you should be working with your incident response provider on that practice. They should be working with you as well. In fact, every bit of technology that's going to be a part of your response, or that could be affected by a breach, needs to be a part of those simulations, and needs to be a part of that whole technical tabletop exercise at the least, to make sure that everybody knows how these systems work, and everybody knows how they're integrated and what's going to happen should a breach occur. So I've worked with a lot of folks that, haven't really thought about bringing in their IR service provider until there's a problem. And, one of the other things I'm realizing is that sometimes those IR service providers aren't even on your list of cyber insurance preferred providers. And there's been a couple of situations that I've heard of there where that provider's had to hand off in the middle of a breach. Not ideal.
Oh, because they won't pay out.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm working on. One of my next reports is going to be about the role of cyber insurance in incident response, because most people do have an idea up front of who's on that panel, but if you're not fully ready in the moment to understand what you have to do and how that's going to affect any kind of claim that you make, that's a problem. So it's one of the things that I want to bring to light a little bit more in upcoming research.
Absolutely. I've learned a lot about cyber insurance in the last couple of weeks, and most of it has been shocking. One of the things I learned a couple of weeks ago is, somebody told me, and I'm not sure if this is true in all cases, but whether or not to pay the ransom, if you have cyber insurance, often that takes that decision out of your hands, and the insurance provider is actually going to make that decision for you. And you might disagree with that decision, but it's right there in the contract where they get to make that decision for you. And that was kind of shocking to me.
Yeah, I have heard similar, and I have also just seen, premiums and deductibles that, even if you made a claim, you're still going to be paying quite a bit, and you may not end up getting any assistance from that cyber insurance company. In fact, I'm really wondering what's going to happen with ransomware and cyber insurance, and if that's even going to be something that's going to be included moving forward, given the current situation. So I think we should all keep our eyes on it at this point.
Yeah, definitely. So speaking of, some more specific categories here, I think what you have on the divest list, some of it's not going to surprise people, but some of it might. So can we talk about that a bit, about, what has been on that list for a while versus what has gone onto it more recently?
Sure. So what's been on it for at least this 2 rounds now is automated malware analysis, which is sandboxing, and NIDS, network intrusion detection systems. And then the new entries are ones that I talked about in the blog post, which is SUBA, security user behavior analytics, DLP, and MSSPs, as we just discussed.
Yeah, and I think there's some, I wonder if it's the same reasons, but, NIDS and DLP, maybe SUBA as well. When you mention those, the first thing I think are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of alerts daily. Alert fatigue all over the place, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. They're a bear to tune and maintain. And, the value that comes back isn't always there. I think it is important to have DLP capabilities, but again, honestly, they can be found now in other solutions, other security analytics solutions. They can be found in CASBs actually as well. A lot of that is included in there. And again, DLP is only as good as your data classification scheme as well. If those things aren't lined up and you're really just looking for social security numbers, then there's really no need for a huge bells and whistles type solution. The classification effort is very, very important, but buying DLP isn't going to solve data loss if you don't know what lives where and what level of criticality it is or what level of confidentiality is associated with it. So I think for companies that are starting out that haven't gone through the probably 2-year change management effort of a data classification project, you can find what you need in a more portfolio or platform solution.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing, we often see people overlook is, you're not just buying a product here, you're committing to a very deep and long project, to even get to the point where you can use the product effectively. And DLP is one of those where the only success stories I've ever really heard coming out of it tend to be when it's used in niche areas, for very specific use cases, not organization wide.
Yeah, same. I worked with some manufacturing companies where obviously IP theft is a big deal, and if that's really tightly knit, the classification program, where the data lives, and also the DLP tuning, then yes, it's extremely effective. But this particular company, they spent 2+ years getting this together, almost 3, and still couldn't even roll out something like this in Europe because of regulations. So it's a big undertaking, and not one that just flipping a switch for DLP is going to fix.
Well, you have some great pieces here that I recommend people check out. We've got links to them in the show notes. There's the death and life of the standalone solution, and you've been referring to this Forrester Tech Tide.
Yes.
Goes in with the whole wave tide, kind of ocean themed.
We like a good theme at Forrester.
Yeah. No, I like it. So both those links are in the show notes. Very interesting stuff. I've got to say I agree with most of it. And I like a good security industry soap opera. And I can't agree more with some of these, seeing MSSPs go in there, hopefully that results in maybe some better quality services out there for the ones that stick around. And the malware analysis sandboxes, that's one where from day one, I was like, I don't think this is going to be for most people. Like, they just want the malware gone. They don't want to know how often it brushes its teeth.
Yeah, there's a level of maturity that I don't think that the folks that were creating these products understood was needed. This isn't something that a medium-sized business is going to have any time to do. To your point, they just want it gone. It's great if you have a team that's able to do some of that real forensics work proactively, but most folks just want to stop something horrible from happening.
Right. And it's interesting, because that was something that just came out of a need for technology, where FireEye had this technology, and I think Malware Analysis Sandbox was their 3rd or 4th pivot using that technology, trying to find a place for it. So it wasn't the customer's need; it was this technology they created that they're trying to find a niche for, and eventually they were successful with that one. Not because people needed it, but because they had, in my opinion, really, really good marketing. And we're able to IPO off the success of that, and then built, bigger portfolio. And I don't know if it can be considered a platform at this point, but there was a bit of faking it till they made it there, I think.
God, I'm probably dating myself, but I actually think I saw something like that, or maybe that product itself, a demo in Arizona. Gosh, 15 years ago or more. Whenever demo doesn't even happen anymore. So, it was a long time ago. And I think you're right. It was a product looking for a market rather than vice versa.
Well, some great insights. Really appreciate you coming on to the show today. And we're going to take a break here at Security Weekly, and we'll be back around 2:45 p.m. We've been talking to Jess Byrne, a senior analyst at Forrester Research.